How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, Initiation. This is from 1990, so just 1 year after the last sequel, but this time around we're directed by Brian Yuzna. Brian Yuzna is maybe a little bit of a deeper cut horror director, but I really do wish more people knew about him. He obviously is most known for this movie, Society, which if you haven't seen it, big over-the-top crazy movie. But also, he did some really good horror movie sequels. He did the Reanimator sequels, but he also directed Return of the Living Dead Part 3, which is easily the best Return of the Living Dead sequel. Very underrated. If you haven't seen Return of the Living Dead 3, go check it out. It's pretty cool. This movie stars Maud Adams and also features Clint Howard, the ice cream man himself. Clint Howard does another one of his weird, crazy, gross characters in this, and he does it very well. He plays Ricky this time around, but I don't think it's the same Ricky. It's the same name, but I doubt it's the same Ricky unless they, for whatever reason, put the top of his head back on and just released him out into the wild. I doubt that would happen, but then again, this franchise is a little off the rails, so maybe. Who knows? I mean, Clint Howard on the TV would actually watch Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3, so this is probably its own continuity. But then again, in Part 2, they watched Part 1 in the movie theater, so who knows what's going on by this point. This movie is definitely a significant step up. It does have a few problems that the past sequels have shared. Primarily, the biggest thing, this is barely a Christmas movie. It comes up in like a couple scenes, but Christmas really isn't referenced too much. What you think that would be one of the easier things to do with this franchise? Your Silent Night, Deadly Night, have it be a big Christmas movie, but it really isn't. And I don't know why 2 and 3 didn't do that either. It's kind of weird. It does come up that this movie takes place around Christmas, but it's just not super important to the plot. And also, much like Part 3, sadly no killer Santa Claus this time around, but we do get an interesting replacement. But that being said, even though we do have the lack of Christmas, I do want to say this is a significant step up from 2 and 3. Part 2 was just half a movie. It was watchable, but in an ironic way. And even though Part 3 had some big promises, it's sadly forgettable, you know? So this is the first time since Part 1 that I really feel like I'm watching a new, unique movie, you know? Just Part 3 suffering from direct-to-video-ness. It was a slasher that didn't really slash, and then Part 2 was basically a clip show, and then a so bad it's good movie. I feel like Part 4, we're finally becoming a movie again, you know? And that's really cool. But that being said, this is a cultist conspiracy movie, and it's not a slasher movie. Now, it's still really good, but it's a step in a totally different direction, and I've heard people compare this to Halloween 3's Season of the Witch before, and I definitely get that comparison, but I think where this one I'm more okay with it being in the series than, like Halloween 3 I liked, but it wasn't a really good Halloween sequel, you know? It's a good movie, but doesn't really fit in the franchise. But I feel with this one, the deal is those past 2 movies in Silent Night, Deadly Night really didn't work. So I was A-okay with abandoning ship and doing something completely different. In Halloween 2 was a really good movie, so it didn't make sense for them to abandon ship so quickly. But Silent Night, Deadly Night, yeah, let's try something new. I'm much more okay with that. But yeah, this is a weird conspiracy cultist movie with tons and tons of gore. Clint Howard pulls out a bunch of weird little worm bug things. There's cockroaches. It's really gross and crazy. And it reminds me of things like Rosemary's Baby. It reminds me of Jacob's Ladder, which also came out that year. And a little bit of Candyman with this whole chasing down a story element. So it's got hints of these other movies. But also, it's a feminist movie. It talks about a woman who's put in a bad place, and in an attempt to get out, tries to seek out help, but the help turns out to be something quite dark and creepy. Later on, actually quite recently, Jacob's Wife would come out with Barbara Crampton, which is kind of a similar story. A lady's in a bad spot, and she seeks the help of this vampire, which of course is going to be bad. So if you like this movie, definitely check out Jacob's Wife. That's kind of the same ideology. But anyway, this movie is really fun. If you're not into gore effects, and if you're not into cultist movies, this probably won't be the one for you. And while I am sad it's not a slasher, it is a really crazy over-the-top Brian Yuzna film, so definitely has a lot going for it there. Let's talk a little bit about the plot. I'm not going to be doing any major spoilers, but I do want to say my piece on a few plot points and make sure you guys have a basic understanding as to what this movie's about. We open up with Clint Howard being a weirdo and finding half a burger on the street and eating it up even though it doesn't have any cheese. Yeah, that's the worst thing about that burger. He eats it up and he looks up to the top of the building and sees a woman falling off the roof. She lands on the ground and the lower half of her body catches on fire and she's of course dead. We then cut to this reporter and his girlfriend. The girlfriend will be the main character and they're sneaking off to this hotel room when she looks on the TV and sees the story about the woman on fire, and she's instantly drawn to it, instantly has this sense of obsession about this, and she, for whatever reason, can relate and feel this woman a lot more than normal, so she's pulled into this. The only problem is, while she does work at the paper, she works in the classified section and also does secretarial duties, so she's not really a reporter, but that's where she wants to be. And she goes to her boss and presents the story, and the boss is actually played by Reggie Bannister of the Phantasm movies, so cool to see him there. But the boss kind of ignores her. When she finally does get him to listen, he actually gives the story to her boyfriend, and that really ticks her off, and the boyfriend, for the most part, just is kind of silent throughout this whole endeavor. And that's really an interesting take here. You know, this is a feminist movie, and while a lot of modern movies can drift into being a little cartoonish, here you really see the cruelty in subtle ways, you know, the idea that her boss simply just doesn't listen to her, and her boyfriend doesn't even think to stick up to her. That's really cruel, but not over the top and not cartoony, and that's really interesting. Now, there is a scene later on in this movie where they go to the boyfriend's family for Christmas, and there it does get a little cartoony, but I think they're trying to do the whole parody of going to your family for Christmas and everybody arguing about politics, so I guess, you know, that makes sense there. But yeah, that's one of the few scenes that actually talks about Christmas, which, where we also find out our lead girl is Jewish, which is really only referenced in this one scene, and I think it's something that they could have played on more, but it really just pops up here. But anyway, she's kind of being ignored, and she wants to do the story. She has this obsession, so she decides, if they won't give it to me, I'll do it myself. So she goes out and investigates, and she talks to people like this butcher that saw the girl fall, tries to get more information, but doesn't really know too much, and that's where she goes into this bookstore and meets these women. There's one woman who runs the bookstore and her friends, and also Clint Howard's there. Clint Howard's being a weirdo, but they seem to know him and know who he is, you know, so he's in on what's ever going on here. And while she's there, she asks for a book on spontaneous combustion, and they say, oh, is this about the woman that fell off our roof last week? Well, you might also want this book on witchcraft. So they're introducing this witchcraft plot, and she's getting pulled into it, and she's seeing symbols and visuals from the book in real life. They talk about a spiral symbol, and it appears in her spaghetti, and whenever she's alone in her apartment, things can get dark and weird and surreal, you know, and it gets pretty trippy, and there are several gross things, you know. Like I said earlier, Clint Howard will pull out several gross bugs from several places, and you see that famous picture of him holding this big worm and like, hey, you want this, and it does get dark, it does get trippy, it does get surreal, and it's pretty dang interesting, you know. This, you know, is not a slasher, but it definitely keeps you entertained, you know. So, you know, if you're not interested in a gore fest, you know, you can tell this was the guy that did sequels to Reanimator and Return of the Living Dead, you know. It is crazy and over the top, and even though it's different than what I wanted initially, it's still very, very interesting. And I really did like this, you know, crazy insanity. Very 80s, very rated R. Part 3, nah, a little bit. But this one, definitely hard R, and it is really good, you know. These effects, I think the effects guy was like Screaming Mad George, I believe, really pulls off some crazy, crazy stuff, really lets it shine, and like this one was direct to video as well, but you really don't see it as badly as you did in Part 3. And overall, I really like this movie. Big, crazy, over the top. At points, it is kind of rambling, and you do kind of have to wonder what it's trying to say sometimes. Like, it's a feminist message, but then what's all these roaches about, you know? So the message gets a little muddled, it can get a little rambling, but it sure as heck was entertaining, and I really did like it. So I definitely recommend this movie. It's not gonna be for everybody, especially if you're wanting slashers, but if you like cheesy 80s gore, and if you like cultist plots, there's a lot to like here, and I definitely need to cover more Brian Yuzna films. All that I've seen of his work I really do like, and it really does stick in your head, so I definitely need to do more reviews of his pretty soon. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. If you guys want to see more, you can click right there and see more. That should be my Silent Night, Deadly Night playlist, where you can find my reviews for all the past sequels and the remake, and I'll try to get to Part 5 pretty soon. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.